there, Star Wars collectors. Welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 16 of Ask Bossk's Bounty. If you are new to the channel, then this series is the weekly series that drops every Sunday, and this is the series where you get to ask me questions in the comment section below, and then I do my very best to answer them in the following week. So we've got lots of questions to get through this week, so sit back and relax, hit that like button if you like this video, subscribe if you're new, and we'll get straight on to the first question. Star Wars and Michael Meyer Mask says, what repack do you want to see in the Star Wars vintage collection? So I'm going to bring up a little article that I read on Jedi Temple Archives earlier this week, and this is all around the Slave One. So they're kind of suggesting that it would be a good repack, and it's the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, so it would be a good time to do it. Now, rumours are rumours, but I did hear a rumour that this year we could potentially see a repack of the Slave One. Whether that's true or not, I do not know. I'm only repeating what my sources tell me. It was a while ago that I did hear that rumour, so hopefully, maybe at Toy Fair we'll hear something. Who knows? But going by their article, they might be sort of hinting at it as well. Who knows? Or they're just sort of maybe hoping. And I think that that'd be a really, really good repack. I think at the time it was a Toys R Us exclusive, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think it was that accessible for everybody. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would love the Slave One. We've had the Boba Fett repack, so why not bring out his ship? Biker Scout 74 says, hope you have or had a great time at New York Toy Fair. Thank you very much. For all that you do not know, as of the time of recording this video, Toy Fair is this weekend coming on Friday. I fly out to New York, can't wait for that. And actually the Toy Fair starts on Saturday the 22nd of February. If you were forced to choose between collecting only vintage Kenner / Palitoy Star Wars or only modern, which would you choose? Oh man, that's such a hard decision, isn't it? But I say it's a hard decision, but in fact it's actually quite easy for me. Now, as much as I do love modern Star Wars, you know, I love the vintage collection, but part of the reason I love the vintage collection is because obviously it mimics the vintage figures that I had as a kid. I do like the Black Series, not as much as the vintage collection, but if I had to choose, I would definitely have to collect the original vintage Kenner Palitoy figures and playsets and what have you. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here now. So what can I say? And these are just some of the most recent ones that I've acquired. So got myself a lovely Luke Bespin there. Absolutely lovely figure, that in great condition. A pretty much mint AT-AT driver. Nice stiff limbs on him. But my favourite thing that I've actually picked up recently is this French card back. It's a Meccano card back. It's had the bubble sort of really carefully removed. Whoever opened that when they were a kid, or maybe it's a collector that did it. And obviously a nice mint Bib Fortuna to stand in front of it. And what you can do is you can get a GW acrylic case that actually allows you to have a card back in there with the figure placed in front, and it all sits in one acrylic case. So I'm going to get myself one of those, and I might make a video about sort of GW acrylics and all the different cases that they've got and the ones that I've purchased them and what I think of them. Daniel Boswell says, hey Bossk, I'm new to the channel but like what you're doing. Thank you, Daniel. I'm just starting to collect Star Wars, and I figured the Mandalorian would be a good starting point for growing the collection. However, I have limited budget and limited display space. My question is, should I focus on the vintage collection Mandalorian figures and ships, or should I focus on the Black Series? He likes them both. So I do like them both, and yes, it is hard to sort of decide which way to go. Personally, I would always go and always advise to go 3.75, and that's purely because if you want to collect vehicles and playsets that go with them, then that is the scale for you. Black Series just doesn't have vehicles. We've had the occasional creature like the Dewback, and we did have the massive TIE fighter, but you know, they're never going to release a X-Wing fighter, for example, or a Razor Crest in the Black Series, because it would just be absolutely huge. If they ever did that, it might come out in like a HasLab or something. But if you want play sets, vehicles, figures that can go with them so you can display them, then I'd always go 3.75. The vintage collection obviously is lovely with the card backs harking back to the day of the Kenner and Palitoy days, so you cannot go wrong in my opinion. Plus I figure that with the success of the Mandalorian, I've got a feeling that the vintage collection, we could see quite a few more figures in the vintage collection for those. I'm fingers crossed anyway. Darth Rock 1 says, what's your favourite figure you own and favourite figure you don't have? I think it's obvious what one of my favourite figures is, or is my favourite figure. It's got to be one of my Bosks, probably the vintage Kenneth Bossk if I had to pick one figure. Mind you, Luke Besbin comes pretty close. What a good figure he was, and it still is. But a figure that I don't have, I think it's hard to pick. There's quite a lot of figures that I do not have, but if I was going to pick one that sort of sparked my memory, it would be the Starkiller from the Vintage Collection. If you watch the Only One Kenobi channel, he did a recent review. He's going through the whole of the Vintage Collection, and he got to that one, and that is a great figure, and he had it all loose, and I was thinking, I need that figure loose. Why haven't I got that figure loose? So I think if I had to pick one, the Vintage Collection Starkiller loose figure looks great. DIY Star Wars Dioramas says, do you think the Vintage Collection will make a Razor Crest? And if so, do you think it will be a HasLab massive one or a very much scaled down version for distribution? I hope it's not a HasLab one. I hope it's the regular Vintage Collection one in the Vintage Collection box that anyone can just go into a shop and get for about, I don't know, $100 or something like that. I hope it's something like that. That'd be awesome. And you, my friend, I do know that you're actually making one. Anyone out there that wants to see a Razor Crest being made as a custom, then I suggest you follow DIY Star Wars Dioramas on Instagram, because he's making one. So I'm going to be intrigued to watch the progress of that, that's for sure. Oriel Gox Vanderlucht, I think that's how I say your name. Apologies if I've murdered it. Will you make a video of your complete Star Wars room / collection? Yes, I will. It is on my agenda. I've had countless people ask me to do it. The problem that I have is that the room that I'm in is very small. I need to expand it somehow or get it decorated and then sort it all out properly. But all of my Star Wars stuff at the moment is in 2 detail cabinets, and then the rest of it is just all boxed and in storage, unfortunately, which is a bit annoying, or it's on my desk here. So I would love to do a room tour or Star Wars collection video, and I promise I will do it one day, hopefully soon, but it's just impossible for me to do it at the moment. Armoured Armstrong says, do you think we will get a re-release of Dr. Aphra's droids on their own cards? How about getting a black Chrysantan vintage and black series? He's that black Wookiee, right? Looks a bit like Chewbacca, that's in the Aphra comics. I'm pretty sure of that. I seem to remember him being in the comics. I'm not sure whether that's a popular character enough to be able to get a vintage collection card for him. As for the 2 droids, I would like to see it. I do think that they've probably got a bit too much on their hands to give us those 2. Obviously, Aphra was a one-off, that the main character from that comic series, so it's quite an easy win for them to stick on a vintage card. The other 2, not so sure. I know they brought them out in the black series in separate boxes and everything, but I don't know. I think if they were going to do it, they probably would have already done it. But you never know, because it's easy sculpts for them, isn't it? So you never know, but I can't see it at the moment, no. Years says, question, do you think that even though the basic 3.75 inch got cancelled, they did release the Golden Skywalker Saga 2-packs? So could they do stuff like that again in the future? Yeah, I think they will. I mean, obviously those 2-packs are more for collectors. I don't think kids necessarily want a gold Darth Vader particularly. I think it was all about the packaging for those, with the nice, especially the back of the cards. They look really, really great. I think Hasbro could do anything like that at any point in time. I think they've got all the molds, they've got all the sculpts. They could do it at any time. I think the 3.75 inch movie line was what was cancelled. I just don't think they felt that those figures were going to sell, but I think anything that stirs up collectors, they'll do in a heartbeat. Collector 1970 says, do you think we'll get figures that were made for the 6 inch that were not made for the 3 inch in the vintage collection, like the Mandalorian Heavy Gunner? What, this guy? This amazing guy here? Oh, what a figure he is. I would love him in the vintage collection, wouldn't you? I can see why you're asking. I certainly hope so. They've done it before, haven't they? We've got figures in both scales. But then again, we've got figures in the 3.75 inch that are not in the black series. Things like the Rogue One tank driver and things like that. They're not in the 6 inch yet, are they? So, or at least I don't think they are. So there is that crossover. Hopefully we will, but there's plenty for them to do, isn't there? Plenty. Meister Block says, if you would get the opportunity to cosplay a character which isn't Bossk for free, who would it be? I'm not really into cosplay, I have to say, just throwing it out there. I do like the guys that do it. I think they're brilliant. And I think if I was going to ever pick one that's not Bossk, it would probably have to be a trooper. So maybe a scout trooper. I think they look pretty cool. They always stick out for me when I see a scout trooper out and about when I'm at like a Star Wars event or something. I think those those costumes are great. Josh B says, question, how do you feel about the overall increase in price for Star Wars toys, seeing as most of these end up going on clearance? So obviously I never like things going up in price. I'd like to get things as cheaply as I possibly can. But I think, you know, with inflation and the fact that China's manufacturing prices have gone up, you know, I don't think slave labour as it goes isn't such a huge problem in China as it once was. I'm sure it's still there, but I don't think it's as big a problem. Manufacturing prices have gone up. Saying that, you're right, things do end up on clearance a lot. Not so much in the UK. We don't really have like Walmarts to go on clearance with things turning up for like $7.99 2 weeks after they were $12.99 or whatever, which I often see, especially with Star Wars Lego. I see that is often the case. Things go on clearance, you know, straight away. It's just a weird thing for me. But we don't really have that in the UK. We did have a couple of the waves of the vintage collection. I think it's wave 1 and 2. So the wave with the Range Trooper and Dr. Aphra, those turned up in the Entertainer for at one point for like £3.75. And that is unheard of over here. It doesn't usually happen. So when it does happen, you've just got to grab them. Obviously leave some for other collectors, of course. But of course, I'm not happy about prices going up. I understand why it does. And I think if there wasn't people out there that didn't buy it for full price at the very beginning, then the whole sort of economy of buying Star Wars toys would completely fall over if everyone waited for the clearance, you know? Dylan Bolwinski says, hi Bossk, big fan of the channel. Thank you very much, Dylan. I have 2 questions. First question is, when is New York Toy Fair? So New York Toy Fair starts on Saturday the 22nd of February. Second, where can I find the clear circular stands that you use for your figures? So this one is a circular one here, and this one is a nice rectangular one. So I get those from Ian's Display Accessories on Facebook. He does all sorts of stands, but word of warning, I do have to warn you about this. Every vintage collection figure seems to be different in terms of the holes on their feet. Some are not as wide as others, some aren't as deep as others. And sometimes you do have to modify the little clips, or the little pegs rather, on these for them to fit on. Because a good example is the Lando Calrissian, the solo Lando Calrissian. His feet, the peg holes in his feet are so shallow that I just cannot get him to stand on one of those circular stands. So I had to shave the little peg right down just so he could stand on it, basically. So word of warning. But that is where I get them. Ian's Display Accessories on Facebook. RS Crush says, what do you think of a vintage collection Naboo Starfighter? What is there not to like about a Naboo Starfighter in the vintage collection? I think the box would look fantastic. The ship would look great. They've released it a couple of times before. Give it the vintage collection look and feel. Give us some high detail. And I think it would look great. Why not? Alex Valdez says, my question, would you like to see a movie or show about a young Palpatine? This would be prequel of prequels. Call it Dawn of the Dark Side. I quite like the name, that's for sure. I'm in 2 minds about this as well, because I think whatever the new Star Wars films, trilogy, whatever they do, I would really like it to be away from the main saga story or any characters connected with that main saga story. As much as I would like to see a prequel about Palpatine and what he was like when he was younger and when he turned, or was he always evil? All that kind of questions that we have, I'd like to see answered in a film. Saying that, I think it would follow the same themes as, you know, Darth Vader turning to the dark side, Luke almost turning but coming good, Ben Solo turning. I think they just need to get away from the Skywalker saga, in my opinion, and do something completely new and fresh, like maybe the Old Republic perhaps. Do some Jedi versus Sith. You don't actually have to find out when and who these guys came about. Just have a massive Star Wars battle with Jedis versus Sith. That'd be awesome. Alright then guys, thank you very much for tuning in this week. Make sure to leave your questions in the comment section down below. If you have a question for me to ask the guys at Hasbro when I'm at Toy Fair, be sure to leave that in the comment section below. You never know, I might get an interview with them and we can ask them some questions. So thank you very much for watching as per usual. Drop a like down below, subscribe if you're new, and we shall see you on the next one.